Hey, I'm Josh. This is my 1969-ish sewing machine, and I am 30, and I'm trying to learn to sew with this machine. And this is the journey so far. Okay, realistically, this is my third try at doing this video, but I keep getting sidetracked. So I am taking notes of what I have said, what points I have made or hit, and I'm not gonna get all looped in on myself. As I was saying, I'm Josh. I'm trying to get into sewing at 30. And the reason for this is I just want to make cool, unique clothes for myself. And I feel like as someone who loves fantasy, there's just not a lot of fantasy inspired clothing on a rack. You know what I mean? So it's time that I stop being lazy about this. I've been talking about this since I was like 21 and started getting really into Ren fairs again. Yeah, so we're going to be making clothes. So last week we cleaned this machine, and then just to test the machine, but also to just have some fun, I made a pair of pants. And these are said pants. And here's a photo of kind of how I was planning to style them. There's a lot to talk about here, I know, but these are them. I'm one of those people that enjoys learning by doing and making mistakes. So I just jumped in. I had a pair of pants that stylistically I liked, and I just tore them apart, seam ripped them, and then made a copy of the panels, which took me entirely too long to realize that they were all, each panel, these are 4 panels, these pair of pants, and all 4 panels are the exact same. But yeah, it took me way too long to realize that. But anyway, I just copied that outline and then stitched it all together. I kind of created this waistband loop thing. And the idea being, I love things that drape over each other. And so the idea was like, we use these bands to wrap around our body and make the pants overlap. And that part I really like. That part looked really good. What did not look good were the legs. Somehow these ended up entirely too short. I'm 6'4". I thought I did it right. I did not do it right. These are basically there's like capris. These are like capri length, you know? Not what I was going for. And because the length of the pants, these went from like a fantasy kind of merchant look I was going for and turned it into pirate, which is not what I was going for. But if you like pirate, that's them. Yeah, so pirate pants achieved. Originally, I was going to just jump in to a new pair, just be like, oh, I'm going to make them longer, do the exact same thing. And then I looked at these. I've been wearing them a lot, not really paying attention, and I have noticed some flaws, some extra issues. I was like, you know what? Let's do a deep dive into these pants and see what a newbie is doing wrong from my point of view. And also, hopefully, maybe someone more experienced is going to see this and give me some tips because I need them. But yeah, I'm going to see what I think is wrong and then do research over the next week or two before I come back to this so I can tackle these, do some good seams, and be happy with the finished product. Now you might be wondering, Josh, what's your history with sewing? How knowledgeable are you? Not. When I was 12, I signed up for a sewing class. I was homeschooling at the time, so I was at this lady's house and I would go with my sister. And the first thing I was going to do was make a vest. My style my whole life has been like bootleg Pokemon trainer, you know, broke Pokemon trainer. So anyway, I really wanted to make this like cool vest with pockets all over the place. And I still want to make that vest. But anyway, I got lost in the sauce with it. Too many panels, too many pieces for a first sewing project. And it ended up just dying before it was finished. And we ended up making just like a tote. So that was my experience until I was 21, maybe. I got a sewing machine for my aunt, which I still have. Love it to death. It's a great machine still. I was going for just a Ren fair kind of thing. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to have my own shirt that I've made. And it's going to be awesome. And so I made a shirt and that came out pretty well, but again, I'm seeing issues in this that when I went to find that shirt and look at it again, I'm seeing the same issues in that. And a lot of that has to do with this like fraying stuff. So that's the extent of my sewing: a tote, a shirt, and now these pants. So without further ado, let's review my pants. So the number one issue with these that I need to make sure I do not repeat was the calf width. I somehow, in the pant leg length, somehow I made these much shorter than the white pants I was working based off of. And I'm assuming that might be seam allowance. I didn't have enough seam allowance, or just measured incorrectly. Something got tripped up. But from the very first try on, these were stuck to my calves. I could not get it over my calf. And it was making the pants kind of lay weird on my body. Here's like a clip from the video when I finished these and tried them on. You can just see it's just very tight. It's pulling in. It's not letting the swoopy overlaying nature of the garment to just kind of flow and sit naturally. That 100% is something we're going to do. We're going to measure my calves and then make sure to measure before we sew those pants down. That we're giving ourselves enough seam allowance, but also not giving ourselves too much and tightening it down. And speaking of seam allowance, our seams in general are rough. As we can see here, this is all fraying already. And what I did, I had done like a quick Google search because I was like, oh, I don't have a serger machine. Isn't that how people do seams fast? And someone's like, oh, if you don't have a serger, then you can do a zigzag stitch and cut along the zigzag stitch. And that is what I did here. And it's working well. It's working better than my shirt that I made, which was all straight stitches. That has fully fallen apart. But granted, I've had it a lot longer. And there's a lot of areas where this zigzag method is like holding up super well. But after being washed, we're just seeing a lot of frayed ends here. And maybe I'm doing something wrong with the zigzag stitch cut method. Maybe I'm not cutting close enough to the zigzag because I'm afraid to actually cut the stitch. But this is just a kind of ongoing issue everywhere on these pants. Every seam is just massively frayed, and I'm not sure if this is normal, and I don't know if this is going to hurt the garment in the long run. I think as this frays more, we're eventually going to get to the seam and we're going to start having holes. So if you have any advice on what type of seam I should use for this, something that's like quick, not super insane, but sturdy and will kind of keep these ends from fraying, let me know. I'll be doing some research also on that. I'm taking notes as I go for the things I see here. Maybe I'm just going to have to accept that for now, every actually important seam that I need to use is just going to take extra time. Okay, next up is our waistband. And I'm honestly super proud of what I did for the waistband, but there are a lot of things that I need to improve on. So here is the back of the pant. And as you can see, these are super wide. They're that wide because we're trying to have this wrapped look. I'm not going to make them this wide this next time around. It was too much. It was definitely too much. But the waistband, I kind of improvised and it's held up. It honestly looks really good when it's steamed. The main problem is I didn't put a material in between this. I think it's called like maybe interfacing is what it's called. But I didn't put something that would sturdy this up because as you can see, especially once we get to here, it just gets so ratty looking. And so we have to hit this with an iron before we use it again. It's the only way to make it look like passable on the body. But aside from that, we had the size right. The pattern looks good. The stitch looks good. I'm really happy with this. I know it probably looks insane to you, but to me, I was like, I'm just trying to think of how can I add some more of this onto this after I've already done a bad thing, like, so to me, this was a win. And I was like, it needs to be strong. What I'll try to do this time around is when I'm adding the extra band, try to slide it in between these two layers. So before I fold this over or anything, try to get it in there and then stitch so it looks a little more less of an afterthought and more of a design. But yeah, that's the waistband. I want to show you the inside too, because what I did for the waistband is a little crazy on how I attached this. From the outside, it's pretty obvious that, you know, we zigzag stitched this on top of our base layer. And I did that on purpose. I wanted it to look like a belt in a way. Hence why I made sure to go with the pattern going the opposite direction, horizontal versus vertical, because I really wanted it to feel so intentionally like a belt. Especially when you wrap it around, I wanted it to almost look like you had a sash. But on the inside is where it gets a little weird. So you can see here, I have the top stitched it to the pant, and we have this flap. And the reason I did this flap is I folded over the excess before I top stitched it down so that it would fray into the stitch, rather than the fraying be up here where it's closer to the exposed part of the garment. I'm not sure if that's clear, but basically in order for the fraying to show from the outside, it'd have to go through the stitch and then over and then back down. And so that's why I did it this way. Looking at it, I'm like, I could have done a better seam before attaching this so that it would have hidden all those frays. I think that's kind of like my biggest issue right now, is just knowing what seam to use, what technique to use. Because aside from that, I really like the waistband. For the interfacing material, I'm gonna be so embarrassed if it's not called interfacing. But for the material that will help add rigidity to the waistband, I saw a video recently and the person that made it was saying that she buys the drop cloths, the painting drop cloths from Harbor Freight, and she'll use that as like a material to go between two sheer things or whatever. And I was like, wow, that's awesome. I have a bunch of that because I bought some to make like cloaks. And that would be perfect for helping just add some stability to the waistband. So I'm definitely going to try that unless someone has a better idea when I do these pants. The final improvement that I want to make with these pants is how they close. So since we use this wraparound technique, since we have it wrap around, the only thing holding these pants up is the friction of having these bands wrapped into themselves once they're, you know, like around the pants. So basically I wrap it like this and then these get tucked into the rest of the band. And that's what holds them up. And that has worked. I wore these at the beach the other day. Everything was great. But the problem is it's still a concern, right? If someone wanted to make these, who didn't have my form, my figure, then they might be at risk of these falling down, right? So my one thing I need to figure out for this next time around is adding like a button or some kind of fastener for these to not necessarily fold into the pants, but rather to hook onto the pants. So a button or a fastener of some kind, because the fact that these, you know, our fly is just created by an overlap, and that's what, you know, makes these decent. That is a concern to me. So that is definitely something we're going to try to apply to these pants. All right, so now I want to show you the material I'm working with because I'm pretty excited about it. It looks very soft. Goodbye, pants. So I think it is called like gauze type material. I think that's what it said. So here we have the old outline, right? I measured this time for my legs, and as you can see, these are way longer. We gave ourselves some extra waist height to work with, so that we could get a little more creative with our bands. What I've been trying to decide if I'm doing or not with these is if I'm going to cut another 4 panels and then use that material from Harbor Freight. That light just went out. I feel like this is no longer in line because I knocked everything over trying to fix that. Anyway, the idea that I have been questioning myself for is, do I cut another 4 panels of this material that I have here so that I can use the Harbor Freight drop cloth as like a liner, as a, not a liner, but like an inner material, the interfacing. I really hope that's the right word. Because then I would have the blue on the outside and the inside, but then I'd have this really sturdy, basically, what is it, like a denim? It's drop cloth? What would you call that material? But anyway, we'd have this really sturdy inside, and I think it would cause the pants to definitely sit more stiffly. But in a way, I like that because these are going to be a lot longer, and I think they're actually going to be a little more baggy, especially that the fact that these pants are going to be tucked into boots. Yeah, maybe even just use it in a portion of the pants, everything except what's going into the boot, I think would be actually really wise to do. But I need y'all's help to decide that because I have no clue if that's a horrible idea, if I'm gonna regret it or not. But yeah, that's basically where I'm at with these pants. Again, we got the length right. The calves are much wider. I checked my calves on the other pants to these, and somehow I lost like half an inch or 2 inches total. So it was an inch on either side. So I just gave myself way too much seam allowance at some point. But these will work. Every panel's ready to go. I need to figure out the waistband also. I know for a fact I'll be using something to make the waistband more rigid. If I could like have a material that's like basically feels like cardboard that never loses its rigidity, I would love to have the waistband just be that type of rigid. Something that wraps around once or twice and it just like is firm, holds you in place, keeps the pants in place, and then has like 2 large wooden buttons to like fasten on either side. That's kind of what I'm thinking for these ones. But I'm going to do some research. I'm going to wait a couple weeks. I'm going to see if anyone watches this. And if you do watch this and you do so, and you do watch the whole thing, I'd love to hear your ideas or any resources you think I should check out, because I'm just going to be watching anything and I'll probably be getting more information than what is actually applicable to this moment right here. But all in all, I'm just really excited to dive into sewing. I'm super excited for a year from now to look back at my first projects and see how much I despise them. Who knows? Maybe I'll still love them. Maybe I'll still be wearing them. Maybe I'll just have improved them, fixed some of the issues. I need to find the shirt that I made because that has like holes, which is hysterical, in the exact same places on the shoulder where the seam has just given out. So somehow that stress point with the seam I used was perfectly parallel to each other. But yeah, a year from now, I think we're gonna have some laughs at this. But for now, I just think everything's so cool. And everything people make online is amazing. It's kind of like overwhelming to see all you talented people making these crazy flippin' objects out of the most insane things you find. I saw someone make this like jacket out of old military duffel bag type things, and it was super sick. And I'm just very excited to be dipping my toes into the water here. So thank you so much for watching. Have a good day, good night, good evening, whatever time it is. Bye.